Hey everybody, welcome to episode 39 of Hiss and Tell. Today we're going to get into some really interesting research about how cats greet their people and why those vocalizations might be more common when the caregiver is male. I'm going to speak with Dr. Kaan Kerman about what cat vocalizations actually mean, how cats adapt their behavior to different humans, why greeting is its own unique social context, and what all of this can teach us about strengthening our relationships with the cats we live with. So join us. Here we go. Welcome to another episode of Hiss and Tell. I am your host, Christina Wilson, and with me today is Dr. Kaan Kerman, who studies human-animal interaction. Welcome, Dr. Kerman.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your warm invitation. So I'm very happy to be here.
Very happy to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you study, where you studied, and just exactly who you are?
Sure. So I'm currently an instructor in the Department of Psychology at Bilkent University in Turkey, Ankara, Turkey. So I have a background in biology. I've studied animal behavior, human-animal interactions. I get my PhD from Italy. I spent some time in the United States getting my master's degree. So I studied all kinds of animals, from birds to insects. And obviously, the topic of today's discussion, pet animals, cats, and dogs to a little extent too.
Yeah. So yes, that brings me to the topic of today's discussion, which is your very interesting paper, Greeting Vocalizations in Domestic Cats Are More Frequent with Male Caregivers. For everyone listening, I will put a link to this paper at the bottom of our episode page so that you can go and read it for yourself. So can you tell a little bit about the paper, about the study, and were you expecting to find any demographic effects on these greeting behaviors, or was the vocalization with male caregivers surprising to you?
So one thing that was quite fascinating was that we had zero expectations about what to find.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely the results, we found it to be quite interesting. So what we did was as many of you know, as many of our listeners know, there are a lot of things that we don't know about cats. I mean, we have assumptions about cats. There has been tons of research about cats, but many of the things that we know about cats rely on information that are received thanks to the support of caregivers, but mostly in the format of surveys and questionnaires because of the difficulty of measuring cats themselves in a lab environment. I mean, good luck with that.
Yeah.
If you want to invite them to a lab,
I know.
right? So yeah, and that's one of the things that we wanted to explore. So what about doing these kinds of studies in a slightly different format, which has been gaining popularity in the last decade or so? Citizen science, asking people to actually send videos of their cats, trying to make it as standardized as possible. It's not going to be perfectly laboratory conditions that we always assume the science would be, right? So like we're controlling the environment, the weather, the temperatures. It's not going to be possible with those kinds of studies, but we do our best. So we wanted to see like how cats interact with their owners. There are, tons of research on separation-related behaviors and whatnot. So we wanted to see, like, how do they react when their owners, go outside and come back home after some time, and we wanted to sort of just see the cats' reactions themselves. So that's what we did, and we looked at all kinds of things that might be considered within the umbrella term that we have in related behaviors, all kinds of different things. We call them behavioral metrics, so all kinds of behaviors that most of us are familiar with, such as, tail up posture, elbow rubbing, vocalizations, movement, all kinds of things, 30 or so behaviors that we can talk in detail later on. And then we looked at all kinds of demographic factors, whether they're influenced by those demographic factors, both the sort of like the demographic information about cats themselves, as far as we can tell, and also demographic information about the caregivers. So the only thing that we found, to our surprise, was that males caregivers essentially elicited a higher frequency of calls. That is to say, the cats vocalized more as their owners entered the homes compared to human females.
Right.
So that was the main finding. And it wasn't influenced by any other factors as far as we can tell, at least in our sample from, from cats own sex and age to all the other things that we did record, such as the pedigree status, the acquisition type, whether they were purchased or not. So
Hmm.
we did not find any of those effects. So they did not influence this pattern that we have.
Right.
So that's the interesting finding. So yeah, we were
Yeah.
definitely surprised.
Yeah.
But we didn't have any prior supposition. So we
Yeah.
didn't have any presuppositions about the study. We just wanted to see, like, let's see what they do.
So I think that's such an interesting result for a lot of reasons, but also, as obviously and I think everyone listening knows, is that cats don't usually greet each other vocally. So do you have any thoughts about why they're doing that with us as humans?
So it's definitely something related to their own co-evolution with us. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the main thing that all cat researchers would probably agree on. And it happens in not just cats, but in other pet animals as well,
Mm-hmm.
domesticated animals, to use a broader term. So I think obviously they don't know that. I mean, they might know. It's just we don't know
Yeah.
whether they're doing that in purpose or not, whether there is some kind of intentionality. But those kinds of calls and vocalizations work great on humans. So many pet animals vocalize more, cats, dogs, and then some farm animals too,
Mm-hmm.
when they're interacting with their caregivers, with humans. And I think sort of we're, if you talk about that from an evolutionary perspective, primed to respond to those kinds of vocalizations.
Yes.
So I think that's what's going on here. But definitely that's not what we see when we look at intraspecific interactions,
Right.
that to say interactions between cats. When a cat interacts with the member of its own species, that's not how things work, or that's not how things unfold most of the time.
Right. It's true. Yeah. I mean, they have all their own body language cues and all the
Sure.
things that they do with each other that we certainly we certainly are not doing with them.
Yeah.
A lot of what they do, I don't think we're about to go do
Yeah.
with our
Sure.
cats.
I know.
I won't go into here, but I think everyone can probably guess a lot
I
of
know. Yeah.
specific cat things that many of our cats were doing this morning right in my face. And I was like, no, thank you. I
Yeah.
know that's so polite for you, but
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you have any thoughts about the possible explanations for why cats were vocalizing more towards the male caregivers? Do you think they might be adjusting for the differences in how men and women typically interact with them, or maybe the male caregivers are noticing their body language communication style less, and so they're kind of upping their vocalization more? Or do you have any thoughts on why this might be?
Yeah, yeah. So the short answer is we have no idea. I mean, this is
Sure.
one of the things that is yet to be explored in detail. But we do propose some hypotheses
Mhm.
that will be tested in the future. So one of the things that I think we have indirect evidence of, due to other studies done on human cat interactions, how cats interact with their caregivers, there appears to be a sex slash gender difference. I mean, I'm using sex as a sort of a biological term
Right.
because we cannot assume people's genders in these studies
Yes.
most of the time. So there appears to be a sex difference when it comes to how humans interact with cats. Again, we do know that females are more likely to vocalize with their cats, talk more to them or say things to them, crouch more, pet them more. That doesn't, again, we are talking about a statistical patterns.
Right.
Usually, when you talk about those kinds of things, people assume that everyone in this particular group are doing something or not doing something. Obviously, many male owners do that, but on average, that's more likely to be the case for females. Again, children act slightly differently when it comes to cats. And also, they react, I think, more to cats' elicitations and cues and signals that they're emitting, but it's not done in the vocalization or greeting context. So that suggests us that there could be some kind of a difference in terms of how different sexes react to cats. And that,
Mhm.
in this case, might mean that cats are learning, adapting to those differences. So that's one possibility. Like they're great adapters. I mean, they're quite flexible in terms of their behavior. They're learning those things. I should behave this way. Obviously, there's this assumption that they might be able to understand. They definitely categorize. The concept formation and categorization is a thing. It's found throughout the animal kingdom. So I think
Right.
they're doing the same thing. Obviously, we don't know whether they're doing that in the case of like human males, human females. Maybe that's not the case, but definitely they learn those kinds of things and adapt to those kinds of conditions fairly easily. And also, there's something else that we can say, and that's mostly about some cultural differences as well. That doesn't
Mhm.
change the fact that cats still adapting, but
Right.
maybe it's not a universal thing. Maybe it's just a cultural thing, and we have to wait and see, so to speak. So to see whether like similar studies find the same pattern
Right.
in different parts of the world. But that doesn't change the fact that cats are essentially learning those things and adapting to that. One other thing that I want to point out, which is
Mhm.
usually misinterpreted when you talk about those things, is that we are focusing on vocalizations emitted in the greeting context, for
Mhm.
example, not in the foraging context.
Right.
So it was just the greeting context. So I mean, they are vocalizing for various other kinds of reasons. So it might mean that it's just the greeting context. For
Mhm.
some reason, that's what's going on. I mean, to give you guys an example from my own household, my cat vocalized more to me when I actually entered the home. But when it's, one thing that we have to say, acknowledge about the Turkish household is that we don't actually, what we do is we do ad libitum feeding. That is to
Mhm.
say, they always have something to eat. Like we
Right.
don't have strict schedules, dietary schedules. But even if that's the case, my wife sometimes does things that she's not supposed to do, in the sense that some food items that might be very bad for the long term health of my cat or our cat, so to speak. Like things that are delicious to cats, but we have to be careful.
Yeah.
So she learned those things. So he is meowing and vocalizing more to my wife when it's sort of cooking time, right?
Mhm.
So when she is in the kitchen, but he's not doing the same thing when someone else enters the home. So that means that greeting is something different, something else going
Yeah.
on when it comes to greeting. This is, again, and the media has been misinterpreted a lot. Like, it's not, generally speaking, cats vocalize more. Maybe that's the case if you look at more studies, but it might not be the case. So we can't say that it's just vocalizations in general, right?
Oh, of
It's,
course. Yeah.
yeah,
It's yes, the greeting.
greeting
Sure.
related vocalizations.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And they do tend to all be different vocalizations as well, right? Which was the next thing that I wanted to get into with you,
sure.
but at least within our house we have currently 15 cats in our house, so we have a lot of cats.
And lots of vocalizations, I
Lots of
assume.
vocal yes, and, each cat has their own specific when you have this many and you're a cat researcher, you obviously learn what each one means, and so each cat has a
Sure.
different one for a different thing, and one might mean
Yeah.
play, and one might mean where are you, and one might mean I'm hungry, and they all mean different things, and it really is interesting to get to know all of the different meanings of the different kind of meows and trills and chirps and greeting sounds and, annoyed sounds and these kinds
Hmm.
of things. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was that vocalization didn't correlate with the other affiliative behaviors in your study.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
what does that tell us about the role of like meows and trills and chirps in greeting contexts?
Yeah. So, for example, as you mentioned, vocalizations did not correlate with the movement towards the food cup.
Mhm.
So, at least in our sample, there was no correlation whatsoever, neither positive nor negative. So that suggests that it has not. I mean, at least in our sample, has nothing to do with
Mm.
foraging behavior per se. So, my assumption is that, and this is something that is gaining has been gaining some traction for the last 20 years or so, is that cats are not loners. Cats are not necessarily just interacting with us to get something material in the sense of
Right.
food or shelter. I think what they're looking for in those kinds of cases is just some kind of socialization.
Mhm.
Not entirely sure what that might be, in the sense that, what is going on in their minds. But I think those vocalizations, again, I mean, cat vocalizations are are a notorious thing to study
Yeah.
because yeah, so the all kinds of that people have been attempting to categorize them. There has been some
Yes.
excellent studies on that, but most of the time there's another paper that's coming up saying that well, that's not the best way to categorize them. Let's categorize them this way.
Mm,
And then we all scratch our heads and go back and then see that, well, there's some minor things going on. And this, like we mostly say that meows and trills, whatever, but it's probably much more complex than that.
mm.
And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why we just said vocalizations,
Yeah.
because it's a very difficult thing to categorize objectively most of the time, like, when we want to do a more detailed study of vocalizations.
Right.
So it could be that certain types of vocalizations might be associated, as many people assume, associated with socialization.
Mhm.
Obviously, we know a lot more about cat-cat interactions, cat versus cat interactions, like how vocalizations work in that context, but not that many things about how cats vocalize when they're interacting with humans, because there are all kinds of flexible responses that we have to acknowledge. So I think it's more about socialization, and the other thing that we can say is that it wasn't necessarily correlated with displacement behaviors,
Mhm.
whatever that is. Right? That's another
Yeah.
thing, that displacement is just something that is going on in these cats, and it's probably an emotional turmoil and conflict, and then they're trying to resolve that behavior.
Mhm.
So again, this is another one of those things that, I mean, vocalization not necessarily correlated with that. So yeah, so I assume it's mostly it has something to do with socialization. That's the only thing that I can say,
Yeah.
at least in our study.
No, I mean, that totally makes sense. So, why might cats kind of separate those affiliative gestures, like the tail up or rubbing,
Uh-huh.
from their vocal communication when they're
Yeah.
greeting us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, it's not like, well, I should vocalize more if the body posture is not working, because
Right.
otherwise we would have seen a negative correlation, right? So it's just
Mhm.
like two different strategies. Well, he or she is not paying that much attention to my needs, so I should switch to
Mhm.
vocalizations, or I should, go back to, physical changes, morphological changes. I mean, vocalization is also physical in a sense, but we
Right.
don't see any kind of correlation in that case as well. So again, this is one of the things that I really don't have a good
Yeah.
answer for. So it's just,
That's fair.
yeah, it's just, yeah, this is one of the things that's like, why is it going on? And
Yeah.
then,
Who knows?
well, oh well,
Yeah.
future studies, hopefully.
Yeah. I love how like like so many questions end up being like, I don't know, future studies.
Yeah, there's just no idea. And this happens a lot more in cats, by the way, and in
Yes.
pet animals. That's one of the surprising things that I found. Like, I've been studying animals for the last, like, scientifically studying them for the last 15 years or so. So I started out with birds and then
Mm.
switched to insects. And then in recent years, I decided to work on human animal interactions, pet behavior,
Mhm.
especially cats. And the game changer was actually us adopting a cat. One thing, like 8 years ago or so. And one interesting thing that I realized was that, okay, so I'm looking at this cat, and he's doing all kinds of things. And I'm trying to figure out why that might be the case. Like, what's the reason behind the study? These questions are difficult, but again, comparatively speaking, easy to understand
Yeah.
in wild animals or wild populations. And then I'm looking at this cat, and then like, well, I should go ahead and check some papers to see what the main reason why my cat is doing that. And then I look at the literature review, find nothing, or
Mhm.
people are just like, we don't know, guys. It's just like, I have no idea why the cats are doing this thing, and
Yeah.
then I go back and look at the cat again, and then the mystery still stands. I mean, this is one of the things about cats. It's just quite a difficult organism to study if we want to learn their behavior and cognition. Again,
Mhm.
in the last 10 years or so, excellent work has been coming up, and we read them. That's a great thing. But compared to other species, such as kinds of birds that I studied zebra finches. I studied parakeets,
Oh,
monk parakeets in the States. So, parrots in general, like 100 years or so,
yeah.
all the things that you can ever say about parrots, or like somewhere in there, right? You just
Yeah.
you just need to dig in and find those papers. Cats, it's just like, this is probably why they do it, guys, like a
Yeah.
100-year-old paper. And then people then follow up, like assume that that's probably why they do it. And then finally, in recent years, people are like, okay, so let's check those assumptions, whether
Yeah.
that's, and then the answer is that, well, that assumption doesn't hold anymore. So what's the alternative? No idea. We should do more research.
Well, the thing is, I think it's so interesting because for the longest time, like, it just wasn't considered, I don't even know if relevant or, like, okay to study cats,
I
like,
know.
you
That's
couldn't
the,
do it.
I know.
I wasn't allowed, my thesis had to be on dogs because I couldn't study when obviously cats has always been my interest, but there was no one doing it, so you couldn't work under anyone, right? And then even if that was your interest, it wasn't good enough, or it wasn't what anyone was interested in. And so you had to pick something else, like you said, like parrots, great. The parrots and zebra finches were like the big thing at my school, or dogs,
Exactly.
or
Dogs,
elephants. Like,
elephants. Yeah.
those were all those people were like, "Great," and I'm just was the one person who was like, "But I like cats," and they were like, "No."
Yeah, yeah. So cats, yeah. So
So, it's nice to see finally cats are, like, really being considered real and relevant, and there is real science coming out about them, which is in part why I started this podcast, because there's so many people I can actually talk to now, so I feel like I'm not in a void. It's not just,
that's
not just me staring at our 15 cats being like, "Mm, like, what can I do in our house?" But anyway, it's really nice to see that, but it's so strange that they were just kind of like this hole in the market for so long, and they were considered irrelevant weirdos and not worth study.
Yeah, exactly. And don't even get me started on wild populations of cats. Like
Ugh,
wild cats, it's just,
I
and
know.
we make all kinds of assumptions about wild cats, and then they don't look like, or they don't behave like wild cats. And then I'm like, okay, so let me look at some papers and see what their behaviors are in a wilder context. And then I find nothing. So that's at least the species, at least the population that
Yeah,
we assume our domestic cats evolved from, right?
right.
So there's essentially nothing in there except some ecological work, like where you can find them, those kinds of basic biological facts, but not essentially their behaviors per se. So that's another thing. Cats, yeah.
So you did your study in Turkey. Do you think there are any cultural factors that you think might have influenced the results of the study, like, versus if you had done the same study in Western Europe or in the US? Like, do you think the vocalization findings might have differed? I know it's kind of like an impossible question, but
No, no. I mean, there could be cultural differences, definitely. It's hard to say what we would expect to see in other cultures.
right.
I personally think that we will see similar patterns in different parts of the world as well. I think this is one of the things that goes beyond cultural differences,
Mhm.
but that's my personal take.
Sure.
Obviously, it can be completely the opposite of what I'm seeing right now. But if you think about the interactions between cats and their caregivers, obviously there are cases of, human female approaching cats in a slightly different way, in the sense that obviously cats are exhibiting various different kinds of behaviors that resemble a human infant. And although both sexes have a tendency, so we call this a sensitivity to pedomorphic features or
Mhm.
childlike features, both sexes carry those tendencies in us humans. Like, we find it cute, we really want to help those who have those pedomorphic features. Cats are, even wild cats are pedomorphic from the start, right? So
Mhm.
they look cute. But one thing that changed in their evolution, I believe, is the ways in which they behave and act, especially the vocalization. So it could very well be the case that, the interaction with cats, when we talk about that in a sex different context, might just be the same throughout the different parts of the world. Females are more attuned to those kinds of things. compared to males, but who
Hmm.
knows? So
Yeah.
who knows? Yeah.
No, that's totally fair. I was just thinking about like if like how important cross-cultural comparisons are for
They
understanding
are,
the cat human
yeah.
relationships, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we should have more like cross-cultural studies because what we have right now, what I did right now, is just a conjecture, right? So we definitely need to do more research on that, larger samples. It's always a difficult thing in cat research to find large
Yeah.
samples. I mean, not because we lack cats, we have millions of
Yeah.
them. It's just that find people who are willing to participate in those
Hmm.
studies, right? So that's where the citizen science come into play, and yeah, we should definitely do more collaborative work on those kinds of things. Again, I think one of your guests in the last week or so talked about the genetic
Yes.
aspect of it. I think we need to have a similar approach when it maybe a many cats project, right? It's like
Oh
many
yeah.
dogs. We
Yeah.
need to have a many cats. We don't have it yet, but I think we should.
Yeah. No, I agree. So, oh, this was something I was really interested in was there any correlation of cat sex to owner sex? Like did male owners tend to have male cats or did female owners tend to have female cats? Like did you happen to like run any stats on that to just see?
Yeah, I don't think there. So, as far as I can tell, I don't recall the numbers, but I don't think we had a statistically significant difference in terms of the sex. You know, whether male owners prefer male cats or
Right.
female owners preferring female cats. And there was another study that we did a year or so ago. Again, I don't we don't find a statistical difference
Yeah.
in that regard. At least, again, in our culture, because the participants were the majority of them were Turkish.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's. But there could be some patterns in other parts of the world. I don't know whether
Yeah.
that's the case. This is one of the things that we usually don't report. By the way, that's what
Oh,
I
I
realized.
know. That's why I asked cuz I didn't see it in here and I love to, like this is just me personally, and so I'll edit this out. I love to, like, drill into statistics to get,
No,
like, the
that's a
little
great
weird
question.
things, and I've noticed in our own house that we have 7 boys and 8 girls, and the boys are, like, this boy gang, they're all together in this, like, dude gang, and because it's myself and my wife, there's more girls in the house than boys, and so whenever a
Right.
guy comes over like a handyman or like a guy friend, they're so excited and they're like, "Oh, it's a dude, it's another
Mm,
guy." And they
mm,
get so excited and are way more excited about greeting this like random
mm,
dude. So I think
mm.
in my head, I was just like, "Oh, I wonder if the cats prefer like if cats kind of male cats prefer having a male owner or if vice versa. Like, do people self-select in this way?"
That's a great
I
question,
don't know.
actually. I do, know, um, we did the study with a student of mine about cat acquisition and preferences,
Mhm.
essentially asking them whether essentially the setup was that we were looking at the potential effects of social studies sensitivity on people's preferences for pedigree versus non-pedigree cats.
Mhm.
So in that regard, we didn't find any effects of cat effects of human gender sex on cats sex. So
Mhm.
there was no effect, but social status had an effect on terms of in terms of you know um, the pedigree status. So
Right.
that's just something else that we can talk about later. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing. There could be some weird stuff going on.
So, could greeting vocalizations be partly shaped by learning? Like, could cats be kind of training their humans depending on what works for them?
I think that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely what's going on in households and pet animals, pet cats,
Mhm.
household cats. And many of our listeners, again, probably observed that with their own cats. And cats, again, are great learners. They're quite flexible in their behavior. And one thing that we have to acknowledge about cats is that we mostly focus on conditioning responses. This is traditionally the cases where you have a cat learning to do something because there's either a reward or a punishment, right? What we
Mm-hmm.
call operant conditioning or instrumental conditioning. And then they eventually figure out a way to get more food or get away from something that's negative or emotionally something that has a negative valence. But there's also great many other types of learning that's going on that we know from humans, and there's some evidence in favor of that in non-human animals as well. That's what we call cognitive learning. That is to
Mm-hmm.
say, there doesn't need to be any kind of external reward or punishment. Cats essentially animals figuring out that this is how things are in this particular environment, right? I think cats are doing that a lot. So sometimes we don't really give them any kind of positive reinforcement or a negative reinforcement, but
Right.
but they figure things out quite fast and quite easily. And you probably have experienced that as well. Again, there are all kinds of differences between cats, and cats do respond. And sometimes they use different vocalizations for different kinds of things. And like the same type of vocalization, but that type of vocalization is used to get the attention of their owners
Mm-hmm.
in a greeting context. But in another cat, the same kind of vocalization is used for something else entirely, maybe not being able to access to a particular room or a cupboard, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing that we tend to see. So yeah, learnability, flexibility, these are the things that probably shape the grading behavior of cats.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you observe any patterns in multi-cat households? I know that you only looked at one cat per household, but was there like a main cat in each in multi-cat households who did the most vocalizing?
Yeah, so when we have, we had one or two participants who were, multi-cat, having more than one cat versus having just one cat, like multi-cat versus single cat households, that
Mhm.
didn't really have any kind of effect on the patterns that we see in the results. So it didn't affect the results.
Right.
And in some of the videos where you have in multi-cat households, there were certain cats that came up and started interacting. So we usually focus on those who elicited a contact faster, right?
Mhm.
So there appears to be situation. Again, we can't say much about it. It's just based on our observations. But some cats are more apparently sociable
Yeah.
towards their owners. Like they're greeting them faster, and then we ask them to send us 5-minute long videos. But many participants unfortunately didn't couldn't wait for 5 minutes, and then there was like all kinds of differences. So we standardized it to 100 second. But in one of the videos, the cat, there was one cat, and we thought that it was obviously they give us all kinds of information at the beginning of a study, but we didn't look at those so that it wasn't influencing our video behavioral codings.
Mhm.
So there was this case where there was one cat interacting with an owner for 4 minutes straight, right? So it's just like interacting. And then right at the last minute, like a few seconds, there was another cat coming up, showing itself, not even paying any attention to the owner, and then disappearing, right? That's also something that happens. There were those kinds of things that requires some attention. I mean, again, multi-cat households are quite interesting. We don't have many in Turkey.
Mm.
Usually we have, we in most cases we find people that have only one cat.
Mhm.
Because as you probably know, Turkey is renowned for its love of cats. So
Yes.
cats everywhere. Wherever you go, you have cats. So people don't really feel the need to actually have more than one cat in most cases
Right.
in there, because I'm feeding all the other cats outside of my home, right?
Yeah.
But that's an interesting thing to look at, the greeting behavior in multi-cat households, just focusing on them specifically
Right.
to see the differences between cats.
Yeah, I think I'm personally gonna look at that now more when we come home. That's always the brown tabbies that are waiting for us at the door when we come in because they can hear us, obviously pull into the
Yeah.
garage, and it's those 3 that are always, like, waiting right there,
Yeah.
like, the gang of those 3, but I know I'm gonna pay more attention to it from now on.
Yeah.
So, how would you like to include caregiver behavior in future analysis? How much the person speaks or moves or bends
Yeah.
down in future studies? Did you look at that at all? I don't think that you did.
We did not. We
Yeah.
did not look at that. We asked participants to act as naturally as possible, right?
Mhm.
So that's what we asked them to do. And one thing we noticed was that they were mostly reacting to their cats in a normal fashion, but
Mhm.
but as far as I can tell, only maybe one person really responded to their cats vocally, right? They did it. I was like something else going in my mind. Like, I think they have all kinds of silly songs for their cats that they
Oh,
sing when they had what they felt a
yeah.
little bit shy at that moment. And it was just like an unintentional standardization
Yeah.
that we had. Like, we asked them to act naturally, and then, those songs are, they're gonna watch me
Yeah.
at a university. Multiple scientists are gonna get together and look at my video, and we'll hear all those, silly songs that I have for my cat, and they're gonna laugh and ridicule me. So they stopped that. They were petting and doing all kinds of things, but they did not vocalize that,
Yeah.
in many cases. I think only one person who did that, saying things, talking to their cats. So I'm definitely positive. Like, I really want to pursue this line of work by adding a little bit of manipulation in the videos. Adding a little bit of manipulation in the study,
Mhm.
essentially asking people to vocalize and talk with their cats, and then at the same time asking others to stay silent. And we can just, do a study where we balance these things across sex and age and all kinds of other factors. So this is something that we definitely want to do in the future.
So, what variables do you think are the most urgent to investigate next in terms of the cat human greeting communication?
Okay. I think broadly speaking, we just need to study things from the cat's perspective. We need more research on that. I think that's the main thing. So, as I said earlier, we do know a lot about how humans respond to cats, how humans view their cats, their
Mhm.
needs, their desires, but how cats respond to humans and just looking at their behaviors directly is something that we need to investigate further. So I imagine studies where you actually not only look at the behavior that's being exhibited right at that moment, but a multiple day, a continuous study where you replicate the same thing over time. We can look at not just vocalizations, but also things that are happening right before and right after the greeting
Mhm.
itself. I think these are not right after, but a few minutes, a few hours later. Those are some of the things that we usually miss because it's not greeting anymore.
Right.
And before that, the owner is not at
Yeah.
home. We do have video recording, so we can do that, but it's not gonna be that easy. So those are the things. I think we have a really good ethogram of cat behavior. Like, we do know those behaviors really well. It's just like, what's the function of those behaviors? That's the thing that we're still trying to figure out. There are
Right.
all kinds of things that they do. To give you an example, needing behavior, right? That's one of
Mm.
my fascinations. There's just needing behavior,
Mhm.
but not all needings are the same,
Right.
right? There are kinds of needing behavior that has some kind of a sexual aspect to it, right?
Mhm.
And there are just needing behaviors that are exhibited right before sleep. There are just other kinds of needing behaviors. We have, as again, we don't really know what the function of that behavior is, or whether there is any function whatsoever, right? So needing behavior has been explained and is sort of like detailed in terms of like what it is. We know what that is, but
Right.
why do we have that? Well, it's probably because of the fact that, as kittens, cats were trying to elicit some milk from their mothers, and then this translates into the needing behavior in
Right.
adulthood. why? But they're like, why is it something that's going? Is it because of um a byproduct of them carrying those pedomorphic juvenile like features into adulthood, or is it something that actually works on us humans, and then that's why it was selected for in their past
Mm,
when they were being domesticated? And I think like even a simple thing as needing behavior requires more effort. And I think in terms of reading behavior, just simple vocalizations again. All kinds of vocalizations, but we don't really know which those vocalizations represent functionally for that
right.
cat, let alone like mentally what's going on in the
Well,
cat's
yeah.
mind.
Who can ever say?
Yeah, there is something going on, definitely. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I'm not one of those people who say that it's a black box and we can't know for certain
Yeah.
what cats are thinking. I mean, they are thinking animals. I mean, I mean, is that's again beyond the focus of this talk, but cats. I mean, all animals have some kind of a mental capacity. It's just like again, as you said, theory of mind.
Mhm.
Where does it begin? Or like several layers of theory of mind? How many levels? Like, is it the second level? Is it the third
Right.
tier? So yeah, I mean, it's just more research. I think cats is just one of the things that we need to do more research on. And every time we do something, I think we're gonna learn a lot more than just making assumptions.
Of
And
course.
I yeah, and I think that's what we need to do. So yeah, the needing behavior. That this is another thing that I want to focus on. I'm fascinated with it.
So,
It's
do
just like
you
I don't have a really good answer to why they do
yeah.
that, and nobody does. I believe
Do cats in the wild do it?
we don't know. I don't think we know that. I don't think we. So wild cat. I mean, felines, like other species of cats. I
Yeah.
don't think they exhibit that behavior. I don't know about wild cats. I mean, like wild cats, not like a little bit of domestic
Yeah, yeah,
cat
yeah.
gene in it. I don't think we really observed what's going on. The assumption here, I think, is that it stops after weaning and
Mm.
that's the end of it, which might be the case. I think that's what's going on. I think that's really the case in the wild cousins of cats, like the wild cats. But it's not like it's something that happens from time to time in cats. I mean, it's happening at specific moments in
Yeah.
time for specific purposes. It's not just randomly occurring in a cat's life. It's like play behavior, one of those things that carries into adulthood for those
Mhm.
animals who has those juvenile-like features still existing even in
Right.
adulthood. But what's the purpose? Like, why do they do that? Like the explanations for it, things like, well, they miss their mom and they see me as their mom, and that's what they're doing that, which is again an assumption, but not
Yeah.
very scientific in this
I thought
case.
it was also considered like a almost like a self-hypnotic, like comforting behavior, especially when it's like pre-sleep. It's used as almost like a human staring at the fire, just like a way to kind of do
Ye-
a self-hypnosis type real comforting, in the same way that often that kneading in kittens when they're needing to get the milk out of the mother
yeah,
leads to
yeah,
sleep when they'll sleep nurse, right?
yeah.
So it's kind of hearkening back to that. I
Could
don't
be.
know. That's just something that that's my own conjecture from
Yeah,
doing rescue work and seeing so many litters of kittens and raising them and then seeing that
yeah.
happen. I'm like, "Oh, they do this. They fall asleep, but they're still sleep nursing." Gives them a feeling of comfort then as they're older before they get placed in their homes, and leave our house. I see them do that before they fall asleep. It seems to be like this is a comfort behavior that they do that helps them get to sleep.
That could be. I think some, and that's the thing. I don't think we have one type of needing
Yeah,
behavior.
no, I don't think so either, but I really fight against this idea, and this again is just me personally. I don't like this idea that's perpetuated in kind of general that like cats view you as their mom. Like
Yeah,
cats are
anthropomorphic.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're not stupid. They know
yeah, I
you're
know.
not their mom. Like,
I know. Yeah,
huh?
I know.
That drives
They're
me
all.
crazy.
I know, like anthropomorphizing cats. I mean, it's so easy to anthropomorphize them. Again, just not viewing them as any kind of organism with a mental capacity is just, an extreme form of, and I think it's called anthropodenialism. Franz de
Yes.
Waal was one of those people who coined the term, and I agree with that. Like an extreme form of it is just like they're not like humans. They lack all kinds of
Yeah.
capacity, mental capacity. I think that's too much. But going to the other side, going overboard with the idea of anthropomorphism and then just saying that they're just like human babies is also not very, I mean, obviously scientifically accurate, but also taking away something from their mental capacity too. I mean, they're not, again, they're
100%.
just
They're not
yeah,
stupid. They know that you're
I
not
know.
their mother. You're clearly very, very different. Also, this idea that
Yeah,
cats think that you're just a big cat. Like, no, I
yeah,
don't
we don't
think
know.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah, again, we don't know, but like you smell different, you look different, your communication style
yeah,
is different. You're not showing them your butthole all the
yeah,
time unless you're a
yeah.
real weirdo. And then I
I
think
know.
you need some help if you're doing that.
Yeah.
You don't use a
And I'm
litter
pretty
box.
sure
Like,
there are people out there
oh, God.
doing that, right? I'm 100% sure of it. I don't think it's just a conjecture. I think it's going on somewhere as we speak right now. Anyway,
No. It's awful. But yeah, just this kind of thinking, it's so narcissistic on the part of people. It really drives me insane.
I know,
So I
yeah. And the only thing that I think that most people agree on when it comes to needing behavior or the needing behavior as we understand it is just like it has positive valence. There's something positive.
yeah.
I think that's what it feels like to them,
Yes.
something positive. But they do, there's some kind of a sexual aspect to it. Some had a little bit of aggressive aspect to it. Sometimes it's just like it. Sometimes to me it feels like greeting,
Mm.
but yeah, no idea. This is just it's a very difficult thing I think to study in cats, but that doesn't stop us from trying.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's true.
shouldn't at least, yeah,
Yeah.
stop us from trying. But yeah, again, like to wrap it up, I mean, and for this question, I think we do have a really good ethogram. I think it's revised recently,
Mhm.
a year or two ago. There was a study published in the animal, and then they have a newly revised ethogram for cats, like all kinds of behaviors that they exhibit, and I think that's great. And I think the next step should be just like trying to understand the functionality of it or what it feels like for them to actually have those kinds of behaviors, the cognitive side of things and the
Mm.
functional side of things. And functionality is again difficult to study in cats too because they're not necessarily under the strong selective pressure of natural selection. We do
Right.
have our own selective pressures that we implement them, but they're again, I don't think they are that pressured by by the
Yeah.
environmental factors
Yeah.
anymore, at least. So all kinds of variation going on in cats, and that makes it a little bit difficult, but also quite fascinating.
Yeah. So
Any other questions?
yeah, I think my
Yeah.
I think my last question would be, what do your findings suggest for cat guardians who want to strengthen their bond with their cats? Is there anything that people should be doing?
Yeah. Well, listen to your cat. I think that's one of the things that you should be doing. I think that's one of the things that we can, one of the main conclusions that we can draw from the study is that, again, as I said it earlier, is that cats are great learners,
Mhm.
right? And whatever we do in our homes, it has an effect on cats, right? So cats
Right.
are not just automatons just reacting to things, and cats are not like humans as well. They're not human beings, so we need to put a little bit of effort into their worlds, into their minds.
Mm.
And like whenever they're trying to greet us, focus on those things that they're doing. And this is something that I constantly am exposed to, right? I mean, I learn every time when I interact with my cat. And I think this is the same for many cat owners and people who are caregivers for cats. Just listen to their needs and their expectations, so to speak. And sometimes it's quite obvious. Sometimes it's quite obvious. We're just missing that.
Right.
We just get used to that so much that we just sometimes think that that's not really that obvious. But yeah, pay attention.
That's great advice. I mean, that's the best advice, honestly, I think for cat cat people. So thank you so much. This was such a fun discussion. I had such a nice
Thank you.
time talking to you. And yeah, I think we came up with some great ideas. And yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah, it was. I mean, thank you for your invitation. It was just a wonderful thing to talk about. And we definitely need to think about some of those ideas
yeah.
in detail
Yes.
later.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. If you're looking for one-on-one support with behavior issues like litter box problems, aggression, anxiety, or multi-cat dynamics, you can find me through my behavior consulting business, Catitude Adjustment, at catitude-adjustment.com. If you like the episode, please consider leaving a rating or review. It really helps us grow. For more episodes, show notes, and resources, head to hissandtellpodcast.com. Huge thanks to Cat Beats for the music, and I'll see you next time.